What's up, guys? This is Pink Across. Today, I want to explain what a play style is, why they're important, and how you can use them in your team building. Let's get right into it. So, a play style is a way of categorizing Pokemon teams based on how they achieve their wins. Let's look at an example. Stall. This is the bulkiest play style there is, and it achieves wins by walling down the opponent's team and gradually chipping with hazards, status conditions, or just a bunch of attacks throughout the game. Next is semi-stall. Semi-stall, although it has many of the same Pokemon, functions very differently from a stall team. Instead of relying on being able to infinitely wall the opponent's team and slowly make progress, it is slightly less effective at walling the opponent's team in exchange for having one designated breaker or progress maker where the team's goal is to wall things and slowly use pivots, often the U-turn Corviknight, to get in that one progress maker to break the opponent before they themselves are broken. Next is balance. This achieves wins by using a combination of walls and offensive pressure. And an example like this, you have breakers like a choice banded Dragapult and more bulky Pokemon like Zapdos and Garganacl. Bulky offense and offense are probably the most confusing to understand the difference between. What you need to understand, first of all, is that both of them have more power than a balanced team. Both bulky offense and offense have immediate power, and their goal is to break the opponent's team before the opponent's team can break them. This is done not through recovery moves or extending the game, but just by hitting hard. The main distinction is that bulky offense is able to hit hard because of the natural bulk of the breakers it uses, whereas offense hits hard because it outspeed the opponent. This is not a hard rule, but that's generally the main difference. If you look at the team on the left, this is a sample build with a choice banded Great Tusk, a Volcanion, and a Dragapult. These are the kinds of Pokemon that can take a hit and fire back in return. Something like a Great Tusk is powerful enough that it can take basically any hit, as long as it's not special, and fire back with a choice banded close combat or headlong rush. Now you'll notice the team on the left is quite slow and only has one Pokemon, Toxapex, with any recovery move. The reason this is okay, and the reason such a slow team without any recovery can function, is because of that immediate power. You look up the team on the right, very different kind of situation. A lot less bulk, but a lot more speed. Same amount of power, approximately. You have Pokemon that are going to pack punch like Baxcalibur, Iron Valiant, and Greninja, but the team is a lot faster than the one on the left. So that's the main distinction. Both of them have immediate power, not a lot of recovery Pokemon, not a lot of walls, if any, but bulky offense uses bulk to get hits off, and offense uses speed to get hits off. That's really the only confusing distinction between major playstyles that you'll hear about. Next up is hyper offense. This achieves its wins by using a series of setup Pokemon. Sometimes you'll have leads. In this case, common leads are Sandy Shocks and Hisuian Samurott, but all HO teams have typically 3 to 5 setup sweepers. In this case, a Swords Dance Iron Valiant, Swords Dance Kingambit, and Agility Walking Wake. Now, there are some other play styles people will bring up. These are all the main ones, but you'll sometimes hear about some other play styles, even though they're really just subsections of the ones I've already explained. Still, I'm going to go over that and talk about what they are. One you'll hear about is bulky balance. This basically functions exactly like a balance, except it's a little on the bulkier side. Maybe instead of 3 Pokemon that are inclined to offense and 3 Pokemon inclined to defense, you'll have only 1 or 2 offensive Pokemon, kind of walking the line between balance and semi-stall, but it functions for the most part just like a balance team. Next, you have Sun, Rain, and Hail. Sun teams are typically offense. Rain teams are typically offense, and hail teams are often HO. Electric terrain and psychic terrain. Psychic terrain often has a lot of setup sweepers like Armor Rouge and Poltergeist, making it HO, whereas electric terrain, despite the fact that it also makes for short games, doesn't use as many setup sweepers, making it offense. Typically the speedy variant of offense, not bulky offense. Trick Room is also an offense, just sort of goes about it in a more gimmicky way. Whereas instead of having the immediate speed you're used to, it sort of uses a combination of bulk with the Trick Room mechanic to gain some artificial temporary speed. Sticky web teams are basically just HOs with a sticky web lead. They often use a lot of setup. So now let's go over, why do these playstyles emerge? Why have these terms been part of the Pokemon community for so long? And what makes them important? Well, I'm going to hop on to PS and I will show you guys why exactly this is such a big deal. Okay, here we are. I'm going to start building a team and show you what happens when you don't consider playstyle. So let's say I'm building a grassy terrain team. I say, okay, great, I'm going to use Rillaboom. What's something that likes grassy terrain? I'd say, oh, Halucha. Okay, Halucha with grassy seed. I can run Swords Dance. Okay, great. I've got a sweeper. Seems looking good. Okay, well, at this point, I don't have a Ghost Resist. And let's see, are there any Ghost Resists that like grassy terrain support? Absolutely. There's King Gambit. You say, okay, I'm going to run a King Gambit. It'll have leftovers. It'll resist Earthquake. That will be great. And ooh, okay, now you notice, geez, this team's really weak to fire. Any fire resists that appreciate grassy terrain. Okay, maybe you add a Toxapex. You realize now that you're very vulnerable to setup. Maybe you don't like the look of a Excalibur against your team or a Dragonite. So, okay, all right, Dondozo. And then you notice, okay, don't really have any good answer for Zapdos. My team's looking weak. Is there anything that can deal with electric types and Zapdos and also appreciates grassy terrain? Oh, Clodsire, perfect. Okay, so what did I do wrong? Well, I didn't identify a playstyle. When I saw this Rillaboom, I should have asked myself, okay, what kind of team am I making? Is this going to be an HO? Am I going to maybe put on a Grimmsnarl? Or is this going to be more an offense? Is Halucha going to be maybe not on the team if this isn't an HO? And what happened, because I didn't identify that playstyle and I just thought about what I needed to support my team, what I needed to not get broken by something, or what I needed as support, I ended up with a mix of play styles. You could technically call this a balance. If you're really struggling to identify a play style, you could call anything a balance, but it really isn't. Dondozo is not a balanced Pokemon. Halucha is not a balanced Pokemon. What I have here is a very ineffective mix of HO and stall, basically, is what I've done. And this is not going to perform well on ladder if you make teams like this. And the reason why, as we just went over, is because play styles are about how a team achieves victory. And how does this team achieve victory? Well, it doesn't. It might if you get really lucky and the opponent doesn't have an answer for something. But this team doesn't work together to achieve its goals. You've got a Pokemon like Dondozo that's going to switch in and do something like stop a Baxcalibur. And it may perform that role well, but the rest of the team doesn't back that up. You don't need something that's just going to stop Excalibur. You need something that will stop it and also apply pressure to the opponent's team, because this is not a stall build. If you are using a Pokemon like Dondozo, that's going to be a momentum sink. You're going to lose all your momentum when you switch this into a Glaive Rush and let your opponent go into something maybe like a Dragapult or a Greninja or a Goldengo. And what's your switch into that? Oh, you'd say, okay, I've got fine switch-ins. I've got a King Gambit. All right, well, how many Make It Rains is that going to take from a Goldengo? If you were a stall team, you wouldn't have to worry about that being a problem, because stall teams don't mind Dondozo being passive because the entire team is passive and designed to wall everything. So there is no loss of momentum because stall is constantly at 0 momentum and it doesn't care. But on a team like this, that becomes important. And then you've got a Pokemon like Hawlucha. How does Hawlucha work? Well, it's kind of inconsistent, right? What if your opponent has a Zapdos? What if you get chipped on a Rocky Helmet and then a Baxcalibur Ice Shard takes you out? Well, normally you would say, oh, that's fine. I've got another sweeper in the back. I don't need Hawlucha to be consistent. It's okay if it just chips down the Zapdos, or it's okay if it gets one kill, or it's okay if it just close combats a Corviknight down to 30% because I've got another sweeper like a Swords Dance Iron Valiant in the back that will appreciate that I chipped Zapdos, that I chipped Corviknight. But you don't have that here. So if this Hawlucha fails, if this Hawlucha gets Ice Sharded or Brave Birded, what's next? Well, no, nothing's next. You've lost your sweeper, and they can easily recover whatever Pokemon lost health on your very passive Toxapex Dondozo Clodsire core. So these Pokemon do not work at all well together. You considered grassy terrain. They all like grassy terrain. They all seem like they support each other, but because you deviated from having a defined play style, this team does not have a goal. So whenever you're building, before you add anything, the first thing you should do is to decide on what the play style is going to be. So when you start off with Rillaboom, ask yourself, am I going to take this team in an HO direction or an offense direction? And it's okay if to make multiple versions, but make sure you know you have a play style. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I also now offer one-on-one tutoring sessions. The link to sign up will be in the description.